All right, and welcome to what I think is going to become our annual tradition, our Christmas episode, which we're going to be talking about movies, pop culture, how it relates to China, maybe go woke, go broke. We'll talk about all of those things and more with our special guest, Christian Toto. All right. Yep. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. And joining us, like I mentioned at the tease of the episode, we do have a special guest here, Christian Toto, who is the editor of HollywoodandToto.com and host of the new podcast, Right on Hollywood. Also, we have Jim. How's it going, Christian?
It's going great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. So Jim, I guess the behind the scenes on this episode is we were looking back at what we did like a year ago to see if we did like a year in review episode at the end of the year. And we were like, oh yeah, we had Christian Toto on where we talked about Hollywood, and I think Wonder Woman was coming out at that time. And we're like, yeah, maybe we should reach out to him and see if he wants to come on again. And then simultaneously, just by pure coincidence, you reached out to Jim and was like, hey, you interested in having me on the podcast? We're like, absolutely. So yeah, I think this is going to be the start of an annual tradition. What do you think?
It's kismet. You can't fight it, really.
No, you can't. Absolutely not. So
it was as if it was scripted.
Yes, right. If it was scripted, you wouldn't believe it. If it happened in a movie, you wouldn't believe it. So
go ahead.
So yeah, no, I think there's been a lot of topics. There's kind of the main ones that we covered last time, which I don't think we would have predicted that would be covering this time, which is just movie theaters and COVID and how movie studios are coping and all of that. But then there's a couple of other topics that I want to get into. Like I said, I kind of teased at the beginning, Hollywood and China's relationship seems to be fraying at the ends a little bit. So I want to get into that. And then obviously we have to touch on the concept of, go woke, go broke. So I think we'll cover all of those, but to just retread some of those old topics, another year of COVID. What's kind of your read on how studios and the theater chains are dealing with this?
Well, I think studios are realizing that the adult-minded films, the Oscar bait movies, they just don't really move the needle at the box office at this point. That could change. I suspect it may not change. But I think it's older Americans who are a little more fearful of COVID. I think older Americans who just said, I just spent a year watching every new movie at my home theater. I had a great experience.
Right.
There's still so much content out there I could watch. And many of these platforms are giving me new stuff almost immediately, like Netflix and Amazon Prime. I'm staying home. So I think what we're seeing is sort of a split between if it's an event movie like Spider-Man, people will rally and see it. Or if it's a horror movie of any kind of consequence, they'll see it as well. I think horror movies do a great job of sort of making it a communal experience. You want to see a horror movie in a theater with strangers, all clutching your popcorn at the same time. I think that's fun. I think comedies, if Hollywood were still to make them, would have a similar kind of effect. But I think the industry is changing. I think our behavior is changing more importantly, and I think that's fascinating to watch.
Well, how about you? Obviously you do a whole host of movie reviews. I could pull up the website here, Hollywood and Toto, which it's got a bunch of articles on here I have not looked at yet, so I'm gonna have to check those out. But do you go to the movie theaters, or are you just kind of like one of those that just wait for it to come streaming, or what's your deal?
So I get invited to almost all the movies via theatrical presentation. It's a critic screening. Sometimes they have audience and critic screenings same time. I think lately, because of COVID, they've had more critic-only screenings. But I also see a lot of films via screening links, so I can stay home, watch them on my laptop. And what I usually do is I kind of kick them to my TV in my house to kind of make it a better presentation. You really do want to give the movie a full chance. If it's an action movie or certain visually powerful movies, you want to see it on as big a screen as possible. But I have to say, when things started getting looser and the chance to go back to the theater happened again, It didn't feel as magical to me as I thought it would. I was
Hmm.
a little kind of surprised by that. I think Tenet was the first movie I saw after the pandemic hit, and then I've seen, about a dozen or so more after that. I don't know. I think if I watch it at home, I don't know how much I'm missing. I've been kind of curmudgeonly about that, I have to say. I don't think I represent everyone, and there are still times the theater experience is wonderful, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I couldn't wait to go back feeling that I expected.
Hmm.
Well, Christian, Spider-Man No Way Home opened, a few days before we're recording this podcast, and it's the big Christmas movie. I think the box office is already $500 million at this point globally, and it's a big film. It's probably the biggest opening, certainly by far the biggest opening since COVID in the United States. I've read some articles, not necessarily at hollywoodandtoto.com, but in other places where people are supposing like this is it, this is the return. Now we're going to go back to normal. People are going to go to the theaters and see these things again. And then I add to that, when Dune came out, what was that, a month ago or a month and a half ago? A lot of people, it got very good reviews, and I guess they're going to make a second one. So it'll be a few years, but they're going to make a second Dune to complete the story, actually. But a lot of people that I trust that have good reviews said you really need to experience Dune in the theater. It's something that you have to see on the big screen. You have to listen to the audio on those enormous speakers. That experience can't be replicated at home.
Yeah, you have to have someone chomping on popcorn right behind you and kicking your chair.
Someone talking and looking at their phone. Yeah, all that
Talking
stuff.
here, I'm talking here.
That's right. So I guess I'm pushing back on that. Is our movie theaters back? Or is the fact that the Spider-Man, the latest Spider-Man movie is such a huge hit, an indication that we may be going back to normal, at least on how we see big blockbuster films?
Maybe closer to normal on those big blockbuster films. That's the real caveat here. Dune is one of those examples where you really do need to see it on the big screen for all the reasons you mentioned. It's just a better experience. It really takes full advantage of everything the filmmakers had in mind from a sonic point of view, visually speaking as well. But Spider-Man is a very unique case. It's one of the most durable brands that we have. The actor is excellent. Tom Holland is a very good choice for Peter Parker. This particular project had oodles of nostalgia baked into the cake. And I think that was really catnip for a lot of audiences. And I think that we've seen some less exciting MCU movies like Black Widow and Eternals, where people were kind of hungry for that old school MCU, and they delivered it certainly with the new film. So I think there's a lot of different reasons for it. I also think there's a sense that this isn't the issue. It isn't significant, but it's sizable. The woke factor, where when Eternals was coming out, all you could read about was how diverse it was. It was not just diverse; it was uber diverse, and they even changed the main characters in ways to make it even more diverse. And the American public has no problem with diversity. We rush out and see every Fast and Furious movie, which may be the most diverse big enterprise or franchise that we have. We don't blink an eye. It's just like, okay, these are fun characters. Let's go for it. We don't, we have no hesitation there. So I don't think it's the diversity that really kind of maybe sets people off. It's sort of the aggressive nature of it. It's the lecturing. And I think there was a sense that the Eternals had that all over the place. And Spider-Man, that was not a factor at all. And I think you kind of combine all those different elements, you've got a perfect storm of a huge box office hit.
Yeah, so I want to. That's kind of my first main topic that I want to get to is this concept of wokeness in Hollywood and all of that. And I've seen your headline that Jim's got up on the screen right now. Spider-Man: No Way Home is the anti-woke blockbuster we crave. And I actually think that was kind of like the takeaway that I've seen from a lot of like movie review people, kind of on the right side of the aisle, whether it's Daily Wire. I think Breitbart even put out something where it was just saying like they steered away from the wokeness, and then they reap the benefits of all the people coming in mass to watch this movie. And I'm just wondering if there's a little bit of a overstatement of the wokeness in Hollywood movies. And I know that like some things are kind of they're like I don't know, like Star Wars Episode 8, right? The Last Jedi. People talk about that as being like a super woke movie. Me being a big Star Wars fan, didn't like that movie. But I didn't really think it was the biggest. I didn't think it was super woke by any means. And I think that there's a number of examples of that I can pull.
Mhm.
And I'll just bring up one more, which was the latest James Bond movie. There was a lot of headlines with the lead up to that movie, and the lead up to that movie was 2 years long, where it was
Yeah.
just like, oh, they're making James Bond, it's not going to be a British guy anymore. It's going to be a black woman. Get ready for the new era of James Bond or whatever. And you watch the movie, and that's not what happens, like, at all. It was completely overstated.
Yep.
So what is do you think that this like wokeness in Hollywood is a little bit overstated, or, what's your read on that?
It's a yes and a no, and I want to tackle some things independently. I think that the industry thinks that we all want to be woke and diverse, and to an exceeding degree. So that you had 2 years of, Bond was delayed, it was delayed, and every time they spoke about Bond, oh, we can't have Bond girls anymore. We have to get more empowered women. So I think the industry framed that movie as being woke. And I think they did it over an extended period. And I agree with you. The movie itself was not that way.
Right.
But it actually underperformed a bit stateside. I think it did pretty well overseas. I think in part because people were kind of put off by that, because Bond is the ultimate alpha male. Bond shouldn't be woke. Bond should be a guy who's a killer, who loves women. The women love him back. And that should be okay in our society. We don't have to have every suave super spy being, enlightened. It's okay that he's a bit of a cat or a little bit of a man's man. That's okay. But the framing of it was woke, woke, woke. So if you're a on the fence Bond fan, you're thinking, I think I'll pass, or I'll wait till it comes on home video, or not so excited about it anymore. So in a way, it didn't even matter that the actual product was pretty woke free. I think the marketing was so aggressive that it hurt the film. So
why would they do that though? I mean, if
they have no idea,
if the film doesn't have
that messaging is putting off half the country, if not more. They have
I think that in some cases, whether it's was it Captain Marvel or even Lady Ghostbusters, I know it's just called Ghostbusters, Jim, but we all know it's Lady Ghostbusters. It's like they know that the movie could do better if they stir up controversy. So now they're like, oh, it's going to be this giant woke anthem. So then you've got one half of the country rolling their eyes and be like, oh, really? Are you serious? And then the other half, knee-jerk reaction to the eye rolling, is like, oh, this is going to be my movie of, it's going to define my, life on Earth, so it just stirs up this big controversy. And then what happens? It gets a ton of media attention, and then that turns into money. So like this, my cynical approach to this is that these woke debates are kind of stirred up, that ginned up out of nowhere sometimes, so that they can get a bigger box office hit at the end of the day.
Well, you get mixed results from that. And I don't know how much they think about all of these things. I think that just sort of the atmosphere in Hollywood is woke, that woke is good. We need to be more woke. We have to, kind of push in that direction. So I don't know if they're thinking about the blowback. I don't know if they're thinking about that's a way to spark controversy. And I just mentioned 2 examples. I think Ghostbusters from 2016 was an inferior product.
Oh,
yeah. I think we can all agree on that. Yeah. And I almost think that the woke sort of framing of it was a little defensive. Like, well, you can't say this is bad because then you're a misogynist. You hate women. And yet, I remember it might have been, I think maybe the next year or close enough to it, Wonder Woman came out. Now, this should have been a woke jamboree because it was a major figure in comics who was a woman. We didn't get many female-centered superhero films. We got some, but, the focus was more on men. And they didn't do that at all. It was really just, here's Wonder Woman, here's Gal Gadot. Let's just see if you like it. And you know what? The product was excellent. And the product spoke for itself, and it was a box office bonanza. And I thought that was very interesting. It's almost like if you're insecure about your feature film, maybe you kind of go in the woke direction to kind of stir things up potentially, or you feel just offensive about it. It's not up to snuff. We saw that with Birds of Prey too, which was another mediocre at best movie. They kind of went full woke on that marketing, and it didn't do well as well. So it's just kind of interesting. I don't think there's a consistent philosophy, but I also think when you talk about woke is never consistent. Yeah. You can have actors who say the most horrible, offensive things, and they're fine. And then you have Gina Carano says something that's fairly, maybe a little bit incendiary, but not a big deal, and she's gone.
Yeah.
So I think part of woke is understanding it's wildly inconsistent. There are no strict rules, and it's more about power than anything else.
Yeah. Well, you say in your review of Spider-Man No Way Home is the anti-woke blockbuster we crave. I mean, that is exactly what I want to hear. In fact, I was inclined to see the latest James Bond, but as we just talked about, the marketing for it was so woke. I was told that, this was basically an emasculated James Bond. And so even if the final product didn't turn out to be that way, that's what I was told. So I had no interest. So it was pretty dumb marketing. So can you explain to us how, can you explain your headline? Spider-Man No Way Home is the anti-woke blockbuster that we crave.
I think one of the things that bugs me about woke is that it often takes you out of the movie experience. So if you're watching a movie and maybe there's a theme about class warfare, that's perfectly fine. You can kind of weave that into the story. You could weave anything. You can weave an anti-capitalist sort of sentiment in the story. Films are often richer when they have a subtext to them. Some of the best horror movies of all time have done that. George Romero's Dawn of the Dead looks at capitalism in a way. He's got these zombies walking through the mall. It's a beautiful statement without saying a word. But I think what the woke does is that it gets more overt. It's in your face. There's a lecture. There's a bit of dialogue. There's a moment in the film that goes, oh, I can see they're trying to send me a message. Yeah. And to me, that just takes me out of the experience. If you go to the movies, almost always it's escapism. It's a way to kind of, lose yourself in a story. So if I'm watching Spider-Man, I want to get lost in the Spider-Man story. And I did with this film. And just on a personal note, I was having kind of a rough emotional time. My wife had been going through some tests, and we didn't know the results yet. And it was a big test. And if the results were bad, our lives would change forever. And I had that on my mind when I'm watching the movie as I entered the theater. But through most of the movie, I wasn't thinking of my wife and those tests, which ended up being clean. I was thinking about the movie. I was lost in it. Right. And I love that. And I don't want you taking me out of that. And if in the middle of the movie, Zendaya says, the patriarchy is really a problem out of the blue, that's not good storytelling. Yeah. Maybe there's a way to tell that theme within the story that doesn't kind of yank me out of the experience.
Yeah, the worst example of that I can think of when I was watching Jurassic World 2, which was not a good movie. But I'm watching it and I'm just like, whatever. It's not so bad that I'm turning it off. But at one point, one of the villain characters referred to one of the girls as a nasty woman or something, this is in the heart of the Trump administration. I think that was a headline that he called.
It's a perfect point.
And it took me right out of the movie. It took me right out of it, and it was just well, they did that for Trump hits, and one of the biggest hurdle that movies have to deal with when they're trying to get you engrossed in it is that suspension of disbelief. And it's just once that happened, my the veil was just lifted, and I realized that all of these are just actors, and the dinosaurs are just CGI, and I was just removed from the story, and I couldn't enjoy it anymore.
Another quick example is Avengers Endgame. There's a scene late in the movie. There's this massive battle, and all of a sudden the female Avengers kind of coalesce to do something. I think they're saving one of their fellow fallen Avengers. And it was so obvious that this was a you go girl moment. And what was kind of pathetic about it and kind of revealing was that many hard left websites, I think maybe the Mary Sue might have been one of them, said, ew, that was so pandering. And it was. Yeah. And it was so pandering. Even the people they were pandering to were recoiling. So when you lose them, you've done it badly.
Well, in that scene specifically, because yes, I think that it's a hallmark of just this blatant trying to send a message, but it didn't even make sense.
What a coincidence! They're all together and they're all moving forward as one.
But not only that, but you had one character who's godly in power, and then another one that's just really good at karate or something like that. So it's they can't even compete on the same level here. Yeah. But on the counter end of that, Mandalorian season 2, there's an excellent scene in the season finale where all of the heroes are rushing off of the ship to attack, the bad guy's ship, and then you realize afterwards that they all happen to be women. And it's just they do it so seamlessly and so naturally and so awesome that you don't lose that suspension of disbelief that I mentioned, and you're just along for the ride. And it was a great moment that did it genuinely, whereas the end game was totally manufactured and lame.
And another thing that you mentioned, are we overstating the woke? In a way, I think sometimes we are. And also, I think we're all so beaten and battered by this whole cultural change that even if we see a small little moment, we go, oh, it hits us harder. There's actually a moment in Spider-Man: No Way Home. I'm not going to reveal what it is. It's a very small moment. It jumps out a little bit. It's not a big deal, and it's gone in a flash. But I think we're just so used to it and so annoyed by it often that maybe it lays a heavier punch because of that.
Well, to
And
me,
maybe,
it's like they're talking down to you. They're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I bet you're gonna be upset by this," and it's like, "No, we're not." It's just like, don't ruin my movie. That's all I want. I don't want this ingenuine collection of all of our heroes that doesn't make any sense. Like that's
Mhm.
just so that you can like stick it to this hypothetical, misogynist. It's like just that's not a place to make that statement, and it's just lame and ruins the movie. That's why I get upset by it.
Well,
When a character in Star Wars has purple hair, it doesn't faze me at all. you know?
That didn't trigger you, huh? All
I
right.
love watching older movies, especially from the 80s, and that's older.
It is
But
now.
I'm really curious how, when we look back in 10, 20 years at this period of cinema, how we're going to react to all these moments and all this woke. I mean, are we going to be rolling our eyes even more then? Or is it going to be maybe, oh, those are the good old days when it was only a moment or two? So it'd be interesting how that ages,
Yeah, it's a very
Yeah,
good point.
I mean, we talked about this a year ago on this podcast about how some of the so-called jokes or some of the moments of woke are so, like the one in Jurassic World 2, I guess. What was the line you said? Oh yeah, nasty woman or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and so it dates the movie so that it's no longer timeless, and that you will automatically think, oh yeah, that was back when Trump was in office and everybody and Hillary lost or whatever. It brings you back to that time. And as you were talking, Christian, I was trying to think of, I'm 51 years old, so of course I've seen movies made in the 70s, movies like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. I mean, it's obviously a 70s type of movie by the way it looks, the way it sounds, with the costumes and all of that. But I'm still transported back into time of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's a movie of its time, but it being of its time doesn't detract from its art, its ability to entertain you or be interesting. And I think we are going to look back at a lot of these movies that, took the politics so seriously. They are not going to hold up very well at all. I don't think a lot of them would last even 5 years
No.
to be a good watch with the way things are going right now.
When someone says, have you seen Ghostbusters? Nobody thinks of Lady Ghostbusters. Everyone assumes that you're talking about the other one.
Right. Either the original
already
one
dead.
or now Afterlife. Yeah.
It's already dead.
Although if you say, did you see Ghostbusters? Then they will take it.
Yeah.
They
It
know what
depends
you're
on the
talking about.
inflection of your,
Yeah.
By the way, just last night I watched Old School, which I had not seen in a while. And as I'm watching it, it's not a revelation. It's not laugh out loud funny from start to finish. It's actually kind of a good story. But I thought it's very male centric. And it really speaks to the fact that, men, even when they want to settle down, even when they want to be monogamous and grow up, that there's still a tug in their heart to be that sort of wild, crazy, rebellious Frank the Tank-like character. So I think the movie works on multiple levels. And you just know they couldn't make it today, not for any one scene, I don't think in particular, but just the sentiment of sort of recognizing that, I don't want to say darkness in the man's soul, but sort of a longing that we're maybe not so proud of, and how it celebrates that and then also deconstructs it and remind us, yeah, we don't really want that. Maybe it's fun for a few days to be the Frank the Tank again. And it made me sad because I want movies like that. There's nothing wrong with that movie, but I think in our culture, we don't see, we don't see comedies really of significance anymore. You see some on Hulu and things like that and Netflix, but nothing big, broad, universal, big box office hits. They're gone. They don't even try.
Well,
why isn't anybody doing a satire of our woke culture right now? Like an Austin Powers type spoof send up. I think it might pop the bubble, but nobody's willing to make it. It would be
I can't
interesting to
understand why
see.
no one's willing to make it. I can't wrap my brain around it. You think that some indie studio would give it a try? Comedian Ryan Long, who's really funny and really kind of aggressively apolitical, but he just hammers the woke all day long. He is writing a movie, but I don't know when that's going to come out. I don't even know the theme of it, but it seems like he might be someone who'd be able to kind of be the spark for that. But you're absolutely right. How could you look at this culture and think this is the satire we need, even if it's an Airplane style or a more subtle version. Maybe it's all too hard to spoof because it's so crazy, but boy, you've got to take a few swings, and I don't know where it's happening.
Yeah, it's just trying to like fight an ever-changing glob of you're fighting the blob
Yeah.
over here. But that concept of you don't know if they're ever going to make it like an old school again. And I think we're always locked in this mindset of these big Hollywood movies. But because of all the streaming things that you reference, like now we've got these the potential for such a large amount of product being put out there on these like streaming services and all of that like maybe that aren't intended to make $250 million at the box office, and because of that maybe they can be more fine-tuned towards specific audiences. When you're trying to make $500 million at the box office, you need a film that just like pleases everybody, right? And when you try to please everyone, you generally don't please anyone, right? So it's like I kind of wonder if sometimes I see these articles online talking about the new Batwoman show and how woke it is and all of this stuff. It's like, well, that's not made for me or the person writing this blog. It's made for the specific type of woke people that want to see that type of stuff. And I just wonder if like maybe that kind of that type of diversity will actually explode when we see more and more of these streaming services. Maybe there will be like an old school-esque type of movie that's just geared towards like the frat boy crowd or whatever that doesn't care about all the woke people thing. They're only aiming for this specific facet. Do you think there's that's going to be a trend that's going to grow in the coming future?
In theory it could and should, but it just haven't happened yet. I point to the late night situation. Every late night show is either to the left of center or aggressively to the left of center.
Yes.
And then every time there's a new one out there, it has the same bent, which is shocking. And then all of a sudden Greg Gutfeld comes along on a cable station and basically is at or near the top in a matter of months. Well, gosh, who could have seen that coming? How about everyone with a brain? and why aren't we seeing more Gutfeld like late night shows? Because all of these platforms don't want to be in that business. They'd rather leave the money on the table. And so, you mentioned what you said is extremely smart, is that the landscape is splintered. We've got niche audiences.
Yeah.
So if there's a woke audience that wants Catwoman, well, fine. It's there. Go enjoy it. I'll probably avoid it. Not my cup of tea. Where's my entertainment? I'm a niche too. And I'm not a small niche. I'm actually a pretty sizable niche. Right. Where is that? Well, I think that all these platforms just don't want to go there.
There is no audience for Batwoman, for woke lesbian Batwoman. They made it. Yeah, I mean the ratings. I mean, hardly anybody is watching. People watch YouTube videos, get more viewers in a day on many popular channels that I'm sure listeners to this podcast and us three watch on YouTube get more views than the Batwoman show. I don't remember what network is it on. Is it on CW?
I think so.
Does that even exist? Does CW even exist anymore?
It's
I don't know.
On CW Plus.
That's right. But I mean I think that's the complaint of of a lot of of the broader audience for pop culture, whether it's a niche like a comic book movie or superheroes, things like that, is that they keep changing the characters. They keep trying to appeal to an audience that isn't there for them. And in the process, they alienate their core audience. And in fact, they seem to revel in it. They seem to think there's something virtuous about telling their own fan base, to offend their own fan base and to destroy what they thought was great about, the franchises and the characters that they loved.
Well, I want to jump on that, Jim, because I think that's what's important about the new Spider-Man film and the recent Ghostbusters Afterlife. Those two movies love their fan bases, love them. They respect them. They care about them. They reach out to them directly. I thought it was a little bit overkill in Ghostbusters. I thought the movie wasn't strong enough to hold it together. It was charming. I liked it. It was fine. I think Spider-Man is a better example of that. But I when I mentioned it's anti-woke, that's part of it, is that it's not a lecture talking down to the people who come to the theater. It's we like you. We appreciate you. We want to service you with fan service, they call it. And I that's what jumped out at me about this movie, is that it was not only just good and entertaining and fun, but it respected the audience enough to kind of meet them halfway. And I think a lot of these, projects don't. The recent Terminator movie, Dark Fate, which actually was pretty decent, I thought. They buried Schwarzenegger, who ends up stealing the movie. You don't see him until halfway in, and in the marketing, they basically treated it as if he wasn't even in the movie. I mean, he's the rock of the franchise. He and Sarah Connor / Linda Hamilton. Why do you hide him? Why are you embarrassed by him? That he's the franchise. He's the guy who's the face of it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I've got to bring up Star Wars because I think that there has been a weird kind of sea change with Star Wars that we've experienced, where you had the movies that have come out, which have been less than well received, and a lot of people put the blame on Kathleen Kennedy and all of that, and the woke Star Wars, all those claims. But then what's happening on Disney Plus with The Mandalorian, where it's absent all of that stuff, and you could actually look at those seasons as almost being like what you're saying, where you could tell that the people that are making it like the fan base.
Yeah.
Where you could argue that the sequel movies like actively dislike the fan base to a point where they just oh yeah, these characters that you love, they're terrible. They're like one's depressed and living on an island, the other one is just like dead. Like it's just so it's does
Rian Johnson like Star Wars? Can I ask that question?
Yeah, it's a good question. But and obviously those were divisive. They made a lot of money, the sequels, but they were divisive. Whereas The Mandalorian almost seems beloved by the entire fan base. So I don't know. Like I hope that that's Disney, right? So I'm hoping that like Hollywood in general sees that as like, okay, maybe we should replicate that. And I do think that that's what they were going with the, what was it called, Ghostbusters Afterlife, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think it was trying to whereas Lady Ghostbusters, again, you can read into the themes and be like, I think they hate their fan base. And then this one is like, this is for you, this is a movie for you guys. So I'm hoping that maybe we're starting to trend back in that the right direction.
Another quick example, it's a franchise I know nothing about, but I just know enough to mention what happened, was He-Man.
Yes.
Netflix brought it back, and Kevin Smith, the quirky auteur, was the person in charge, so to speak. I mean, he had a significant hand in it. And they either I think they may have killed off the character twice, or they basically kind of pushed him to the side in favor of more female characters.
Yes.
And he, on social media, he denied this and really just kind of gaslit all the fans. And I'm thinking, what are you doing?
Yeah.
He of all people, he has survived for 20 years now on mediocre product and a fan base that adores him. He's been very open and honest and transparent and kind of a cool figure in pop culture land. And I respect that. Right. But when he kind of dumped all over the fans and denied it, I thought, wow, that's really strange that he did that. But maybe he couldn't help it.
Well, what I find, so the Book of Boba Fett is coming out. Donnie and I, because we're total nerds, we rewatched, we rewatched together both seasons of The Mandalorian to kind of get our heads in the right universe to be enjoying Book of Boba Fett. And the second watch was really interesting. You obviously, every time you second or third time watch anything, you kind of pick up, especially if it's good, obviously, why would you watch it more than once if it stinks? But you get to pick up on a lot of things that you didn't see before, some subtle things. And so you really appreciate that what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have done to create the Mandalorian series and have it be so good. I mean, the last 4 episodes of the second season of Mandalorian might be the best product period of the entire Star Wars universe. I mean, I think you can certainly make that argument. If you just put those 4 episodes together, it stands up with anything. But saying all this, you think, gosh, Favreau and Filoni are geniuses. These guys are genius creators. Actually, they're not. They just decided to do Star Wars like Star Wars. Yes, and that was all they had to do. Now that's not to take away their talent as filmmakers and creators, but every one of these franchises, they tried to, the great quote, I think, from Rian Johnson, who directed the abhorrent Last Jedi, said, we want to subvert expectations. No, I mean, you can do that smartly, but Filoni and Favreau decided, we're just going to do Star Wars because we loved it as kids. And we know the feel of it. We know what it sounds like. We know what it looks like. And if we just present that, it's celebrated as genius, when actually it's just being true to the true to the source material. The Lord of the Rings series is the same way. That was before wokeness took over everything, but that was as faithful as could be actually ever be done to fantastic source material with the Tolkien trilogy.
I think the one trap here, and I think we've seen this before, is the whole So many Easter eggs, so many call outs, so many cameos, so much fan service. And oh, we forgot to tell a story. So we hope that's enough. That drives me nuts, honestly. So you know, that's a potential pitfall here. I think Ghostbusters partially hit it. I think Spider-Man really ducked it almost entirely. I mean, you could feel them plucking my nostalgia chords in my brain, and I was like, I'm okay with that. Keep doing it. It works. It's. And I want to mention a quick thing. There's an inside joke in the new Spider-Man movie about one of the Spider-Man's back, and it referred to something that happened earlier in the series, and it was very small, and most people are not going to get it. I'm a geek, so I got it. But also, it was the series acknowledging the flaws that went on previously and being okay with it and laughing it off. That moment had so much goodwill packed in. I couldn't believe it. And that's, again, I think goodwill is the opposite of woke. I think woke is something very different in tone and texture. And I was like, not only did they tell me the inside joke, but they made it okay. They acknowledged that there was a problem in the past, and they kind of were able to laugh about it now. And it just felt good. And I don't want to say more than that, but when you see the movie, you'll spot it a mile away.
Yeah. I think that, when we kind of started off this whole conversation talking about the performance that the new Spider-Man movie is having in the box office. And it's I think that a lot of people are just wishing to kind of go back to normal. Everyone goes to the theater to enjoy these big blockbusters and all of that. So there's been a lot of headlines really pumping up the fact that it did so well in the box office. But if you look at these headlines or you read the next paragraph in a lot of these stories, they always mention that it broke these records domestically, right? That's always the little asterisk down there, is that they broke these records domestically. And the reason why is because it didn't release in China. So there's been this I've been keeping an eye on it, but there's this growing rift with Hollywood and China, where China is trying to bolster their own movie making Hollywood, version, right? And to do that, they're kind of limiting the amount of American movies, international movies that they're going to show in their country. Now, they've been doing this forever, but lately they've cut it in half. Like in the past couple of years, it went from 25% of the movies that they showed in Chinese theaters were international or American made, down to like 13% or something like that. So it's cut in half. And there's been a couple of articles that I've seen lately. I'm going to pull one up, actually. The one that I originally saw was from the Hollywood Reporter. This is several months ago, and it was titled "From Deal Frenzy to Decoupling. Is the China-Hollywood romance officially over?" And then, so this is a couple of months old, but it talks about all of these things. And then, just like in preparation for this podcast, I Googled China and Hollywood again. And this article that was just released, I think yesterday, "Inside China and Hollywood's frayed relationship. We need to stop trying to keep the status quo because the status quo is gone." But, as we have seen in the past couple of years, and this is seemingly a new development, but like almost a dependence on China as being the second largest box office in the world. I think in the past couple of years, it's actually number one. But these Hollywood studios are reliant on getting a ton of money from China. I think Avengers Endgame made like $600 million in China. Star Wars Episode 7 made like $2 billion overall. Half of that was thanks to China. So it's like, and another example, I'll get your input on all of this, is you mentioned the Fast and Furious movies. Well, John Cena, in promotion for that movie, made the poor mistake of referring to Taiwan as a country. So China gets super upset about this, starts threatening that they're going to like boycott that studio and not release these movies. So John Cena had to get on his knees and put on his Chinese hat or something like this and make this really embarrassing apology video, groveling for China's acceptance of his apology so that they can make some money in China. So it's kind of like a weird relationship, but what's your perspective on all of this?
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch. I mean, Hollywood kind of sold its soul to China.
Exactly.
It refuses to speak out in any capacity about the human rights abuses that are rampant across the country. It refuses to do anything on screen that would be untoward to China, including the movie World War Z, where I believe the zombie outbreak started in China in the source material.
Yep.
They changed that. They placate the country. It's been embarrassing to watch. The John Cena thing is really the visual zenith of that particular path. But all the while, China has been saying, we're going to look at how American movies are doing it, and now we can do it kind of the same way. So they don't even need us anymore. And, China is a very nationalistic country, and a lot of their product will be sort of chest thumping in its tone. And that's either what the people want or the government tells them they want, or both. And so now there's not even much of a hunger for American films. And I understand sort of the box office numbers for some recent from recent US movies that did crack the market weren't that great. So I think the glory days are over. It's a good thing. I think Hollywood, maybe Hollywood can use its moral clout to start speaking up against human rights abuses in other country. We're not there yet. They still want that money. Maybe we'll never be there. But yeah, the relationship is not what it used to be, and shame on Hollywood.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned how they had to change World War Z. There's a whole bunch of examples of movies that were changed specifically to cater to the Chinese audience. Some of them have to do with they don't have paranormal stuff in their movies. They won't allow it. If there's paranormal stuff in their movies, they won't show it in China.
Ghostbusters Afterlife is done then, I guess.
It's also a kind of I'll say the government of China is also pretty racist. So a lot of the promotional material in regards to the new Star Wars movies or even Black Panther took John Boyega out of the poster for the Star Wars one, or with the Black Panther, they made sure to keep his hat on, Chadwick Boseman. So it's like, and that's not even, that's not even the half of it. There's other more egregious examples. Red Dawn. Dawn was going to have China as the villains, the invading force. China did not like that. They were threatened boycotts, all of this type of stuff. So they delayed the movie by 6 months and digitally replaced everything with China with North Korea. And it's just so when our movies, our studios are bowing down to the demands of the Chinese government, not the people, the government. It's I see this fraying of the relationship between Hollywood and China as a very good thing, because there might be missing out on some hundreds of millions of dollars, but I don't care about that. I just want to see good product. So if it's not shifting to the demands of the Chinese government, great. I'm very happy about that.
And I also get the sense that American studios probably throw money around very easily and in ways that maybe they could change their ways. They can maybe be more streamlined. They could be more lean and mean, more economical, maybe even kind of look toward the independent film model and maybe take some notes about how they get away with so much for less. And then if their budgets are small, they don't have to kind of placate regimes that, run concentration camps. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, last time we talked about the idea of is the $1 billion movie over? And this was in the context of theaters not being a major thing because of COVID and all of that. But now I'm wondering, is the $1 billion movie over because China might not be you can count on them? When these movie studios make these movies, they're hoping that they can get them to show in China. They don't know. I think some of these Marvel movies are good examples of that. I'm sure they counted on Spider-Man being released in China. And as of now, it's not being released. I don't know if it's going to in the future. Sometimes the delay of releases happens. But it's if they're factoring that in, are we going to really drop $300 million on a budget for this movie if it might not show in China? So again, I kind of wonder if the $1 billion movie era is over.
It's a good point. We'll have to see. And I'd be curious to see if Hollywood stories get, I was going to say a little bolder, but they haven't been remotely bold towards China at all. So just maybe even saying China in a microscopically negative light might be the baby step we need. I mean, right. I want that World War Z example is so telling, because it wasn't the zombie outbreak could have been in any part of the country. It maybe was an accident. There's ways to even frame it where it doesn't say, oh, the government was bad. But the fact that it was born in China was just a bridge too far for that nation. I mean, it really speaks to their sort of nationalistic insecurity in a way. But just the fact that they did what they were supposed to do and they changed the location of the outbreak, I don't know. I think it's a perfect summation of that relationship of China and Hollywood.
Are you saying that a global plague that started in China is just not a plot device that anyone can actually believe?
No one.
I mean, that's just completely unbelievable.
Yeah, in hindsight, maybe China made a good move in making that demand. In this one article,
in 10 years when they make the pandemic movies and they change it to
Taiwan,
some other nation or something.
It'll be Texas or Florida. That's what we deserve. Yeah.
In the Hollywood Reporter article that I mentioned, Judd Apatow is quoted talking about how we need to like decouple from China. I forget exactly what the quote is, but it was like, this isn't just people reading the tea leaves. Like Judd Apatow, I don't know what his standing in Hollywood is right now, but like he's a known name, and if he is making these statements about how we can't live off the dime of China's dime anymore, like I think this is the start of kind of a revolution here.
I have a lot of problems with Judd Apatow. I think he's a brilliant guy, politically speaking, but also he blocked me on Twitter, which is really strange.
How dare he?
But he's been strong on this issue, as has Richard Gere. But I think the list starts and stops there.
Oh, is that right?
There are very few people. Okay. You could see a Judd Apatow's name here and think, okay, this is a good sign. But he's been strong on this issue and he's been isolated in this issue. So I think we need many more people speaking out. To me, you need the George Clooney's, the Tom Hankses of the world to kind of get some backbone and start speaking out, because they're sort of Hollywood Inc.
Well, why did Richard Gere get on this topic? Was that because he was in that movie where he was a American on trial in China way back when?
It's a Tibet issue.
Tibet,
yeah, and he's been persona non grata. I mean, he has said in recent years that he doesn't do any mainstream studio movies because they won't hire him because of his criticism of China. That he doesn't. Yeah,
I saw this article recently about how Amazon agreed that they would only allow 5-star reviews on the latest book by Xi Jinping of China. And so it's like, if Amazon is still bowing down, we've got a lot of work to go, but I'm hoping that the Hollywood and China decoupling concept is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to our relationship with China. But a man can dream. I guess we'll see.
That's right. And that's a scary thing, by the way, that Amazon story. That's creepy and it's unacceptable. And, kudos to the reporters who broke that story. But you think that Bezos and all the Amazon higher ups would be hounded by questions and pressure to kind of explain themselves. But I suspect that's not happening. I don't know for sure, but that should be a running theme in the media that, why is this happening? It should be a big story. But I think it's just going to be like an isolated story that they don't rediscover.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. I'm going to keep my ear close to the ground on it. But there's a couple of other kind of things going on in Hollywood and movies and TV and all of that. And one that I was kind of curious to ask your opinion on is the concept of deepfakes. So this is the idea of digitally putting somebody's face, maybe a different actor, maybe an actor when he was younger or whatever, maybe a past actor, on somebody else, some stand-in actor, so that you could have, 1980s Harrison Ford walking around on the TV when you're watching Indiana Jones or something like that. We've seen examples of it in Star Wars Rogue One. They had Carrie Fisher as a young Carrie Fisher, a young Princess Leia at the very end of that movie. We've seen it a couple of other times. I can't really think of any off the top of my head.
They raised Cushing from the dead and to make him Moff Tarkin again, right?
That's true. They did that. They did that. But then, I think once they realize they have the power to do this stuff, they're wondering where's the end game for it. So I remember several months ago, there was a story going around about, I think, making a new James Dean movie.
That's like several years old, that story. Yeah. And I haven't heard a thing about it, by the way.
Yeah, no, I haven't either. And I think that's because, and I listen to certain pop culture podcasts, and uniformly across the board, unanimously, everyone rejected that idea. So it's like the studios, we have the ability to do this, and they don't know whether or not they should. So what do you think? What do you think is kind of the logical end to this? Do you think it's just going to be reserved to these little cameo spots of maybe if they have another Terminator movie and you need a young Arnold Schwarzenegger to be the Terminator, maybe they'll throw him in for a couple of scenes or anything like that? Or do you think we'll eventually get to the point where we have movies starring actors that died 20 years ago? What do you think?
I don't discount that. I think sometimes the culture looks at a topic and thinks, oh gosh, we can't do that. But then they kind of soften over time and their opinions kind of morph. So while I think we're kind of disgusted by the concept in a greater scale, I don't discount the fact that we may in 10 years say, oh yeah, I want to see James Dean again. I want to see Lauren Bacall again. And if not just for the novelty of it, I think we should tread carefully. I think that the sort of the people who love these people, their voices matter. The family, the heirs of the state, that kind of a thing. But I think in small doses as a storytelling device, I think it's perfectly fine. If the right the right lines are kind of met. If you're going to do a Carrie Fisher, if maybe some of her family members can sign on to it and maybe oversee the production to extent that it matches what she would have wanted. So I think it's tricky. I think there should be a lot of thought put into it. I think it shouldn't be discounted. I think it can be a great storytelling device, especially when it's so clean and so realistic that we don't blink. It doesn't kind of jar us out of the movie. So yeah, I think it's here to stay in limited capacity, and I would not be surprised if we see more of it.
Yeah, I mean, we've traveled past the uncanny valley, as they say. We don't blink anymore about these things. You couldn't have done this 5 years ago, but now it's
another one of those.
Anything.
That's another one of those suspension of disbelief things. If you're all of a sudden Peter Cushing walks onto the screen, you're like, he looks like a cartoon. It takes you out of the movie, so that's an issue. But for all of the movie producers that are surely watching this episode, I do have a pitch for you. I want to see a prequel to The Expendables, where all of the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the Sylvester Stallones and the Jean-Claude Van Dammes are all deep faked to look like their 80s selves, and it'll be a movie that takes place in the 80s. I think it's a
and by the way,
right there.
I've thought this for a while. I think the new Indiana Jones movie, I think they're going to do some de-aging on Harrison Ford, who's almost 80. Yeah. And listen, if I could look as sort of youthful at that age as him, I'd be happy. It's no insult to him. It's just father time. But I just, having Indiana Jones, an action adventure superstar, being a late 70s fellow, I think there's going to be some nipping and tucking going on. We'll see.
Are there any other kind of larger story things that have happened in the past year in this realm that you think are worth kind of bringing up?
Yeah, we mentioned Gutfeld before. I think that's a big thing. I think it kind of shows a hunger that's not being met by pop culture. I cover some independent artists who use crowdfunding in successful fashion, and there's a hunger there. I track a lot of comedians who are, if not right of center, they are free thinkers, and they've been able to survive and, if not thrive, using Patreon, using crowdfunding, using YouTube revenue, podcasting. They're kind of creating careers outside of the mainstream ecosystem and doing it well and doing it without restrictions. I think that's very promising. I also think that the powers that be don't like that, and they see it as a threat. I think you could look at the rise of Joe Rogan as a fascinating. I think he may be a huge story in 2022 because he's just basically looking at every liberal narrative and swatting them away and saying, no, it's wrong. Now, he doesn't always do it in a journalistic fashion, and he leaves himself open to significant criticism. But at the end of the day, he is a comedian and a podcaster. He's not Walter Cronkite. But if he's stirring people up to really kind of do their own research, that's fascinating. And that represents a significant threat. So I think he'll be targeted aggressively in 2022. And I don't know if he'll be able to survive.
Yeah, the Daily Wire producing that movie, I think it was from Bonfire Legend, Run, Hide, Fight.
Yes.
I think that's come out in the past year. But to me, that is like, let's do more of that, people. Let's have some of these movies that the regular studio system won't make being produced by more, right of center organizations like Daily Wire and all of that. And I just hope, and I know that Gina Carano, who you mentioned, has been ousted from the Star Wars whatever because of those comments. She's making a movie under that same model there. So I'm just hoping that takes off, and maybe that'll be another one of those avenues that I mentioned earlier. Maybe these will be movies that are tailored specifically towards our interests more than that whole woke concept.
I want to quickly mention I was on the set of Gina Carano's movie Terror on the Prairie a few weeks back.
Sweet.
A couple of thoughts. I can't share a ton because I'm kind of under a bit of an embargo. One, Gina Carano is a delight. she couldn't have been sweeter, kinder, or nicer. And she was so generous to the group of journalists who were on the set. It really jumped out in a dramatic way. And I was just very impressed by her. And also, this is a significant thing. I contribute to the Daily Wire in a small way, so you can call me a shill if you want, just for full disclosure. But I was looking at my Roku yesterday, just kind of fooling around, and I found the Daily Wire app, and I kind of surfed through it a little bit. I'm thinking, there's a lot of content here. I mean, there's a trailer for the new movie Shut In, which is bringing back Vincent Gallo, which is insane. He's been out of screen for like 20 years. They've got other movies coming down the pike. They've got Adam Carolla doing a stand-up kind of improv special.
Oh, wow.
They've got all their podcasts, which are video-based. They've got PragerU. There's a whole little universe of smartly packaged material aimed at half the country. And I thought, wow, this didn't take long to kind of come to fruition.
Great.
So if there are other maybe platforms doing something similar, I think it's wonderful. I think it's more. More is always better, more voices, not less. And also, I think it might put a little pressure on mainstream Hollywood to say, hey, there's half the country just waiting to be entertained. Maybe you throw them a bone once in a while.
Yeah. Jim is muted, but I will say that we only have like 4 minutes left. So I think
just say one more point. And I think we all touched on it there. It's like in the past, if you wanted to make your own movie that appealed to half the country that was not being serviced, you wouldn't make it because you're like, how am I going to distribute this movie? Who's going to show this movie? Those barriers are completely gone. I didn't know that Daily Wire had its own app where you can check out their audio stuff. I thought you'd have to go to their website or try something else. So everything, we're moving even beyond the, like they say, like over the top of the box world, where now everything is streamed, everything is app. So you don't need a distribution plan or a company to distribute your film. You can do it yourself. You can build your own audience over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, people crowdsource like Star Wars fan films and put them on YouTube and get, hundreds of thousands of views. But we got a few minutes left, but I just want to what are some of the top movies of the year that you've seen that maybe are a little bit of a surprise, and then also kind of looking forward, what are some movies that you're looking forward to in the next 6 months?
I just did my top 5 list of the year on my website, and I have to say I struggled. I just the last couple of years, I felt Hollywood has been very mediocre. And I don't know whether I'm getting older and burned out of my job. I just don't see movies that I kind of fall in love with. I love Jojo Rabbit. I love Joker from the last maybe recent years. So I feel like I still have that capacity to kind of throw my arms around a movie, but I do it rarely. I loved this year. It's called Riders of Justice. I hate the title. It's with Mads Mikkelsen. It's a comedy / vigilante movie. And it's on Hulu right now. If you're a subscriber, I highly recommend it. It really kind of caught me by surprise. I thought it was wonderful. Also, American Underdog is an excellent sports drama. It's about Kurt Warner, his improbable rise to Super Bowl stardom. Zachary Levi plays Kurt Warner. It's excellent. It opens Christmas Day. I thought Spider-Man was excellent, but I really struggled this year. I've seen a lot of Oscar bait movies that are supposed to be wonderful. I thought Belfast was enjoyable and fine. I thought Nightmare Alley was very good, but very flawed. I was just bored by Licorice Pizza. That's one of these auteur movies that are supposed to be amazing. So I don't know.
Sounds pretentious just from the name.
I know the title is. If you ran a pretension Olympics, the title would. But so there's that, and it's funny looking ahead. I haven't scouted 2022 too much, but I will say, back to Daily Wire, go watch the trailer for Shut In. Now, I'm a genre guy. I love thrillers. I love home invasion movies. That trailer is killer.
Okay.
And that's not even talking into the whole, oh my gosh, Vincent Gallo is back as one of the bad guys. It's an expertly created trailer. It's coming in early 2022, only on Daily Wire. So that one, I'm not even just saying that because I want to promote their site or whatever. That trailer got me, and trailers rarely get me that way. And I will say also the Batman, the trailers, the marketing, they've been very sly and very secretive and very teasing in a way that I like a lot. You don't know much about it, so I'm very interested in how they do that. And we've done Batman a million times. We shouldn't need more, but if it's done well, like Spider-Man, sign me up.
Well, it's directed by Matt Reeves, who did the last couple of Planet of the Apes movies, which I've greatly enjoyed. So I'm looking forward to the Batman as well. And obviously we have the Matrix coming out in like a couple of days. So I'll make sure to check that out. Although I will say that I am very cautiously optimistic about that. Cautiously being the word that I'm very on. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we are out of time. So unless you have any last words of wisdom or anything you want to get off your chest, I think we'll kind of call it a day here.
My wisdom tank is empty, but I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, fantastic. All right, Christian Toto. He is the host of the Right on Hollywood podcast. He is also the editor at hollywoodintoto.com. Make sure to check that out for sure if you are interested. That'll do it for this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Thank you so much for joining in. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you are listening to the audio only of this, you can always join us live on Thursdays, with the exception of this episode, where you can join in the conversation, leave your comments and questions. Maybe we'll answer them, show them on screen, all of that good stuff. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at In the Tank Pod. If you have any questions, suggestions, or recommendations for the show, feel free to email us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
You can find me at J Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always visit heartland.org.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for joining us. We'll talk to you next week. Merry Christmas.